and the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most. I stopped and got out and asked him what was the problem. And he said, "I want your car." And I said, "You gotta be kidding." I mean, how many people really do that in real life? They don't. I just kept saying, "God, do it fast. You know, if they gotta die, let them die, but don't let them suffer."
Going to do a videotape reenactment. Sitting in the car is Elizabeth Diane Downs.
Doesn't want a divorce.
Talk to you, refer to you by name, and also refer to your tattoo.
Right.
As close as you can remember, what did he tell you?
If you say anything about what happened here, that they'd come back and kill me.
Diane, your story stinks. This whole thing is done. It's done from the beginning.
I'm sorry.
You've changed it by saying that this guy knew you now, he knew your tattoo, he knows about you, he threatened you. That's a hell of a change from what you said the first time around.
There was no reason for you not to say that at the very beginning.
Okay. No reason in your mind. And I have one man sitting here looking at me with a face of stone. I have another man over there smoking a cigarette, 90 miles an hour, and pacing. You're not my best buddies. I wouldn't go drinking with you, that's for sure.
Do you feel guilty about what you did, Diane?
No, because I didn't do anything wrong. And I wouldn't change it if I could. My kids and I always took the back roads.
Trying to find out who shot your kids. And if it was you,
I'm
that's the way
doing
it
what I
goes.
can. Fine, I
If it's
agree.
you, you're going to take the fall for it. If it wasn't you, then I'm going to quit this job.
Good deal, okay? Next time I remember something, yeah. You can find the guy yourself, because I know I didn't do it. And you can chase your little tails for the next 20,000 years if that's what it takes. You don't like my help, you can it.
You're real confident in yourself, aren't you?
I know that I didn't do it.
And it's your turn at bat.
Since you guys seem to think that I should have brought Diane with me, I will get it myself, because I know who did it.
You do know who did it.
Yes, I do. I damn sure do.
You know him by name?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
You saw him shoot your kids.
Yep.
It's pretty important.
And I saw him grab my arm and yank my arm out and shoot my arm and say, "Now try to get away with it." And I'm leaving because I know who did it. Bye.
The time is now 17:46, and Diane is just departed the office. We're concluding the tape.
Like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God, this is worse than this. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure he didn't intend to shoot my arm. I guess sightseeing, I guess you'd say. And the kids got tired. They fell asleep in the car. So I decided to just head on home. But I saw a road I hadn't been on before. We like to take back roads. And just went down that road. And there was a guy standing in the road, flagging me down. So I stopped. Everything was done in a matter of 5 or 10 seconds. He swung himself around and fired twice. One caught me in the arm. The other one I went off somewhere. Danny cried the whole way. I could hear him softly just moaning. And Christy was dying. God, all the blood. And as I say, she may be the only one to get me out of this. Would I have brought her to the hospital? Wouldn't she be the one that I would make sure is dead? There are too many holes in it. I have done a good job of it. Why would I have taken my kids to the hospital? Wouldn't I have made sure they were dead and then cried crocodile tears? That's insane to think that I would do such a thing and then bring the witnesses in against myself. That's crazy. I'm here just to appeal for people out there, to, if they know anything, to call in. Danny's going to walk again. I don't care if we just have to will him to walk. I think he's going to walk. The doctors all say he won't. But I know that your mind controls your body, and if I can love him enough and encourage him enough, please arrest me so that I can prove I'm innocent so my kids can come home, and they wouldn't. This man shot my daughter. My first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage, My entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching. And the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. What do you do? It was like a slow motion picture. When he swung around, he was pointing, when he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips of my fingers. And that snapped me. And I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are going to die. And I'm not going to let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. I'd like to see him try to take this baby from me. And how? I got pregnant because I miss Christy, and I miss Danny, and I miss Cheryl so much. I'm never going to see Cheryl on earth again. And you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But children are so easy to conceive.
My whole life, even as a child, all I really thought about, I used to carry dolls around on a pillow, and I wanted to be a mom. I got pregnant when I wasn't allowed to, and I'm not saying he forbade me to get pregnant, but I didn't consult him. I wanted to have children, and so I got pregnant without asking permission. 2 years' time, I had 10 separate lovers. 2 years. That's not very many. I could sit here and cry and be all upset. And what's it going to prove? It proves nothing. I am who I am, and I can't prove that I'm anybody other than what I am. Why wouldn't they arrest me if I did it? If they really had this evidence, I say they didn't. I don't know. I don't know.
Doesn't that kill you?
No.
Why?
I'm a survivor.
All I know is that I did not murder my children, and 1 year after my uncle was murdered, my children and I were attacked for no reason at all. Why is my uncle and his contact from the State Department and their Israeli contact in this book?
Did not commit these murders? Or the murder and the other crimes you were convicted of?
Absolutely. I didn't commit them, and I still maintain my innocence. Somebody in the road flagged us down. I stopped and got out of my car, and he said something to the effect of, "I want your car." And I laughed at him. And I said, "You've got to be kidding." Because in my mind, those kinds of things don't happen. In Arizona, those things don't happen. I don't know about Oregon, but in Arizona, those things don't happen. And so he jumped into the car, leaned into the car, and started firing the weapon. And it happened so quickly that by the time he stood up and faced me, it was over. I mean, it was just that fast. He said something about the car again, and I struggled with him. The gun discharged. He fell back. I jumped in the car, put the keys in the ignition, and took off. The car door shut by itself. That's it. And I went to the hospital. Christy and Danny were in the back seat. When we got to the hospital, they were still crying. The nurses reported that they were still crying. The state says that I was the one that shot them and that I wanted them dead. If that was the case, I would not have taken them to the hospital still crying. There are so many other ways to accomplish such a horrific deed if I was going to do it. I'm certainly bright enough to figure out another way besides some way that looks so absolutely insane and hokey that nobody would believe it. I'm not dumb.
Ultimately, you told several different versions of the story when law enforcement investigated this, correct? When you talked
Not
to the
correct.
authorities, ultimately, well, I understood that you told law enforcement that this was done by two men with ski masks.
This is what somebody told me. How do I explain this? After my children and I were attacked, the police kept saying, Diane, you must have lapses in your memory because there's holes in this you could drive a semi-truck through. None of this makes sense. You're forgetting something. I believed, because I'd never had any dealings with authorities, and I believed the authorities, and so I thought they did, that I had lapses of memory. I can't tell you how the towel got around my arm, so I know from my own personal experience that I did have at least that much of a lapse of memory. I don't know how the towel got around my arm. So when I would have, people would call me up, and people would say, I know so-and-so, and he said such and such. I have another guy would call and say, I have a neighbor, and he has a car that just looks just like that, and he's been talking. These kinds of things were being said to me either by phone. People would stop me on my mail route. I worked in Cottage Grove, and people would drive all the way to Cottage Grove just to meet me on my mail route and tell me these kinds of things. So I would call the police, or I would go to the police, and I would say, this is what's being told to me. Those are the kinds of things they would say that I changed my story. I wasn't changing my story. I was trying to help. The police kept saying I had lapses of memory. People were calling me and telling me things that I thought, well, maybe this is what happened that I don't know. And so I would tell the police, believing that I was helping them investigate. They didn't tell anybody that these are reports, that I was giving them reports from other people. They would simply say, Diane came in and said such and such. The one about the ski mask was dreams that I was having. And they kept saying, well, maybe you forgot something. So when I would have a dream and I would wake up, I would think, well, maybe that's what I would forget. And so the ski mask story, I didn't tell the police. I was talking to somebody on the phone, and I was sharing this dream, this thought with somebody, trying to understand in the same way that you would talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so that you can, because if you talk, maybe you can reach something. Maybe you can find something that's inside you that's locked off. And so I was sharing this with somebody else, and the police were tape recording those phone calls and then said, oh, there she goes, she changed her story. And that wasn't it, and they know that wasn't it.
Okay, well, ma'am, I guess perhaps you could clarify it for me, because as you said, I am the newest person here, and I'm asking you new questions, but when I'm reading the pre-sentence investigation, and it says, subsequently, defendant gave a total of 3 different versions of the shooting, including that it was done by 2 men wearing ski masks, and also that she knew the person who shot them. Did you not give 3 different versions of the story?
The police said, strangers don't shoot strangers for no reason. So I believe this had to be somebody who knew me. They also, at one point, the last day that I got to see Christy in the hospital, I believe it was June 15th of '83, Doug Welch came to the hospital and said, Steve Downs did this. We know Steve Downs did this. You need to be willing to testify against him. I said, how do you know Steve Downs, my ex-husband? How do you know Steve Downs did this? Give me the evidence. He said, don't worry about the evidence. Just be willing to testify. I said, if you can't prove to me he did it, he's not the one that fired the gun. He said, but he was behind it. I said, I cannot testify against somebody unless you can prove to me that he did this. I know he hates me, but why would he hurt the kids? Doug Welch said, you better be willing to play ball or you'll never see your kids again. And I said, I cannot testify against somebody unless you can prove to me that he did it. The next day when I went to see my children, I was not allowed to see my children ever again. That gave me the belief that the police were absolutely convinced that somebody I knew did this. And if the police believed it, then I believed it. Now, if they want to turn this all around and say, Diane changed her story, that's not what happened. And you guys are on the parole board, and I know you work with the legal authorities. You work with police, you work with the district attorneys, and so you know how they work. It's how I know now what they were trying to do. They were trying to scoop me into a corner so that, I don't know, so that I would say or do something that would incriminate me, which certainly worked. But that's not what happened. Though what I'm telling you is exactly what happened. Doug Welch came to the hospital in Springfield. Oh, I can't even think. Mackenzie Willamette. No, anyway, to the Springfield hospital. He sat right there. He caught me when I was coming through the front door. He pulled me into the lobby. And these are the things he said to me. I went to see Christy for 15 minutes because that's all I was allowed. I left, and he was standing there, and he goes, "I'm not playing, Diane." And I said, "Prove to me Steve did this." He says, "Let us worry about the proof." And I said, "I can't testify against him unless you can prove to me he did this." And I left. The next day, I did not see my children ever again until court. And that was it. And so I believed. I believed what I thought the police believed. Now, maybe they did believe that. Maybe to this day they still believe it, because Fred Hughey was, another time he told my attorney, Jim Jagger said, "Fred, you know Diane is innocent." He said, "I know that and you know that, but she's covering for somebody, and as long as she's going to cover for somebody, she's going to do that person's time." Jim Jagger said, go ahead.
I said, so is it your, is it what you're saying today is that the prosecutor in your case knew you were innocent, yet in order to get someone else, to convict someone else for this, he basically threatened to keep your kids from you in order to get you to make incriminating testimony against somebody else? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Jim Jagger told me Fred Hughey said this to him. I don't know that Fred Hughey said this. I have no reason to believe Fred Hughey said this now. But that's what Jim Jagger told me Fred Hughey said. So from that point on, I believed, from that point on, I believed that Fred Hughey believed that it was somebody that I knew. That's what I'm telling you. That is what shaped my belief patterns. And so when I would talk to the police, I spoke to the police as if it was somebody that was familiar to me. Not because I believed they were familiar to me, but because Fred Hughey told Jim Jagger, and Jim Jagger told me that Fred Hughey told him this. I have no reason to believe Fred Hughey would do that. I don't. Fred Hughey adopted my children, I think, during the trial. Can I go ahead and jump ahead with this?
Sure.
Okay. During the trial, at the very end of the trial, Fred Hughey, they brought in a mock-up of the car, and Fred Hughey got a gun, and he was reenacting the crime. And when he was going through the motions of firing the gun at the Christy doll and at the Cheryl doll and at the Danny doll, he couldn't shoot the Danny doll because the Danny doll was back here. And he raised up and he looked at me, and I went like this, and his face, he had a look of incredulation on his face, and his mouth started to open, and I nodded my head yes, and he had to switch the gun to the left hand. A right-handed person could not have shot the Danny doll. It was at that time, I don't think at any time before that did Fred Hughey believe that he was doing anything wrong. I think that he believed full bore that what he was doing was the right thing. But, and I'm not inside Fred Hughey's head, I don't have the right to speak for him, and I won't speak for him, but it was after that he adopted my children, and according to Christy, never said a bad word against me. Ever. That was out of Christy's mouth. Fred Hughey, in all the time that he raised her, never spoke ill of me. I believe that Fred Hughey knows that there is a man out there that was hunting my children, and it wasn't until after Christy told her schoolmates that she drew pictures in school, and she said, "This is the man who shot us." I lied in court because they wanted me to say this and they wouldn't leave me alone. Dr. Peters, she said, Dr. Peterson kept pressuring me and he wouldn't leave me alone. Those children, the Andresens, told their mother told her, the apartment manager, and the apartment manager told somebody. Now, he didn't tell my attorney until 1991, but he apparently told somebody before that. But it was at that time when Christy was in that school and classmates with the Andresen twins that Fred Hughey decided to adopt my children.
Well, good. I know.
So, yeah, we talked about that. Oh.
You had conversations about your needs, but have you thought about their needs? Because your case obviously has attracted some attention. how will it be for them with all the potential attention that you living with them might bring upon them? Have you thought about their needs in this?
Yes. Every time I call home, I ask them, can we please move? I want them to move to another place. When I used to file legal work, back before I finally got my answers, and you check and see when my legal work all stopped. It's when I finally got the answers and I was finally able to calm down and just be me again, about 2005. But back in the day when my dad would file, I would write everything, my dad would type it, my mom would copy it, and she would do the filing for all of my legal work. Well, my dad, on the filing page, that's the certificate of mailing, you have to sign your name. My dad would always put his address. So everybody knows where my parents live. And so every time I would talk to my parents on the phone, not every time, at least once a month when I talked to my parents on the phone, I would say, please, can we move someplace else? I would like to live someplace else where nobody can find you, because people are going to be coming by the house all the time, wanting to peek in the windows, wanting to heaven knows what. And I don't want us to have to deal with heaven knows what. My dad's 80. He had a stroke 2 years ago. He's very thin. He's lost 30 pounds. He stumbles. He falls. My goodness gracious, when they were here in August, his whole arm was bruised. I was scared to death that my mom was going to be arrested for battery of an elder and I asked, what happened to you? My mom says, he falls now. And I do not want my parents to have to worry about when my mom has to go out and get groceries because she can't get my dad to go in the car. It's easier for my dad to just stay at home. I don't want my mom to have to worry about when she has to go grocery shopping. Is somebody at the end of Quarter Mile Road going to be there throwing tomatoes at the car or wanting a signature, or can you sign my book or whatever? I don't want and so I would ask them, please, please just move. And it wasn't until May of this year when it was finally time. They know by ORS 144.228 that my parole date was May 9th. And so in April, my mom said, I've decided we're going to move and not tell the kids where we're going. I said, okay. But so my parents finally said yes, that they will move. Unfortunately, for me to move, I have to tell you guys where I'm moving, and it's the same as telling the media where I'm moving, and telling the media is telling the wackos. Because somehow the wackos always seem to know everything. And the only thing that I can ask is, please, if you do parole me and you allow us to transfer to another state, someplace, please don't tell anybody where we are. I mean, it's the only way that I can keep my parents safe. I'm not worried. Come on, I live with 4,000 of the worst people in humanity, and it's a washing machine. It keeps turning over and turning over. We in California, we parole 11,000 people a year, and they come right back. So I'm not concerned about my safety, but my parents are old. If you think that it's better for me to parole someplace and never see my parents again, and that's the only way to keep them safe, then I would do that. But I don't want to not see my parents again. I love my parents. My dad needs me to take care of him. He's 80 and he falls. He's a big man. My mom's a little woman. When it finally comes time to start bathing him and taking care of him, my mom isn't going to be able to do that by herself. Sending me someplace away from my parents would not be good for them. I could do it. I've certainly dealt with, I've lost my children. Once somebody takes your children from you, taking your parents is, what's next? But my parents really need me. And so if you're going to parole me someplace to hide me, like you did like the others did Janice Freeman, that's great. But hide my parents too, please. It was back in 85. I saw the eyebrow. It was back in 85. Janice Freeman, when they paroled her, they didn't tell the media where she was. And if you're going to do that for me, do it for my parents. Don't do it for me. Do it for my parents, because they do not need the kookaloos. And I know, there you go. There's some insight. This is what insight has done, because I know what kookaloo. I live with kookaloos every day. I've become inured to it. You get You don't ever get used to kookaloos, but you learn how to survive them. My parents don't know how. My parents don't, my mom will do the same thing that I did back in '83. She'll get a phone call and she'll go out to meet somebody. My parents, please don't parole me away from my parents. They need me. They, as much as you think I'm a danger to them simply because of the kookaloo factor, if the kookaloos can't find me, they'll go to my parents. They will. They will. They'll do whatever it takes because I know what they do in here.
Ms. Downs, I'm pleased to hear that you've been able to keep your relationship up with your parents. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just getting some tissue. Oh, I didn't think I was going to need these this time. Thank you.
Okay. Take your time.
Okay.
What you've been able to maintain with parents. Any other relationships that you've been able to maintain that you'd like to share with that might help you if you release in the community? Are you involved in a romantic relationship at all? Any friendships or anything?
No, none that take me there. None that I would need. No.